So, after you've read chapter 3, you'll do a discussion of it in Canvas. You'll get a chance to ask questions about it. If you still have questions about it that are unresolved after doing that discussion, of course, you can direct them to me privately. I'm happy to answer any of them. It's important that you understand that chapter before you start writing essay assignment number 1, because essay assignment number 1 grows out of that chapter and the kind of analysis presented in that chapter. That chapter helpfully has, as do all of the chapters after chapter 3 in your book, after and including chapter 3 in your book, a sample student essay. It wasn't really written by a student, it was written by the writer of the book, Stephen Lin, I think, but it sort of gives you a model for what kind of analysis I'm expecting in this class and what that analysis looks like when it's in essay form. So if you're wondering, like, how does an essay like this sound? How is it structured? What kinds of language should I use? What's the tone like? You can look at that essay as a model for the kind of essay that you'll be writing, if that helps you at all. So here's a breakdown of the assignment. The assignment is also posted in Canvas in the, I think it's called Writing Assignments and Resources module. All of the assignments are posted there. You have 3 of them this quarter. And so I'm just basically copying and pasting what's there and reproducing it here, and I'll describe to you what you'll be doing for your first essay assignment. So I'm suggesting 2 to 3 pages double-spaced. That's not a hard and fast requirement, but if you're doing what I'm asking, it'll be about that long, so that's just something to shoot for. There are the formatting requirements right there. You can see I'd like those to be standard because it makes my job easier in reading your essays. And then here's the actual assignment. So using new criticism, which we've just talked about and which is described in chapter 3 of your course text, write an essay that supports a thesis statement. You know what a thesis statement is? It's the main point you want to make in your essay. So a thesis statement that is an interpretive claim about the text's thematic meaning. And if you black out and forget what that is and start to panic, just rewind this lecture a little bit, go back a couple of minutes, and you'll see and hear the description of what thematic meaning is, what an interpretive claim is. So don't do any research for this essay assignment. The essay should just be you and the text, no opinions from literary critics, no opinions from the internet, no opinions from SparkNotes or Wikipedia or Shmoop or whatever you want to use. This should just be your own interpretation of the poem or short story that you choose. And speaking of that, your essay can be about any piece of literature, so a short story or a poem from chapters 1 through 3 of our textbook. Don't pick something that's not a short story or a poem. Definitely pick a short story or a poem. Pick something that's literature with a capital L. Okay, so the process that you'll go through writing essay 1 is, first of all, after you kind of digest the assignment, think about what piece of literature you want to write about, plan it out a little bit, is just write a draft. That's the first thing you've got to do. And then submit it for peer review by the deadline. When you submit your essay for peer review, if you submit it by the deadline, you'll automatically be matched up with somebody to review, somebody whose work you are supposed to review. And you'll see that peer review assignment several hours after you submit your essay. No, not several hours after you submit your essay. Several hours after the deadline passes for the submission for peer review. So if you check Canvas, sometime in the morning, the next morning after the deadline, you'll see who you've been assigned to review. And you'll go into the weekly module, you'll see that there are peer review instructions. Make sure you follow those. Don't just kind of review it in a freewheeling way. Review it according to the instructions. And if you complete the peer review by the deadline, you'll get full credit. This is effort-based, so if you make a good faith effort to review your peers' draft according to the questions that I give you and the directions I give you, you'll get full credit for it. And then you'll submit your essay for grading to me by the deadline in Canvas. So the first thing you need to do after you come up with a work of literature that you want to write about from chapters 1 through 3 is to do a close reading of that literary work. Think like a new critic. So go through it closely, think about what literary devices you can identify, think about what the big meaning is that you take away from it. And one way to do this is to make a list of abstract sort of theme words that jump out to you as you're reading the work. And these should be implicit rather than explicit. So just throw out a bunch of words that come to mind that are abstract as you're reading. And then choose a couple of them, choose 1 or 2 that go together. See if you can articulate a complete sentence about that theme word's meaning or significance in the literary work. Remember, one word, simply like, love or fear or hate, is not a theme, but a complete articulation of that word's significance in the literary work, or what it communicates about that idea. What the literary work communicates about that idea is a theme. And I'll give you examples in a couple of minutes, so don't panic if you're like, I need an example. Writing an essay to support your thesis statement. Okay, so after you have your thesis statement, here is what I'm expecting for essay structure. So write a V-shaped introduction leading to a thesis. When I say V-shaped introduction, what I mean is start generally by introducing your topic, which is the piece of literature you've chosen to write about, and then narrow your focus until you reach your thesis statement. Your thesis statement should be the last sentence of your introduction. And then use minor claims to support that thesis statement. So you can think of your thesis statement as your essay's major claim. It's a big statement of interpretive meaning, abstract meaning, thematic meaning in the piece of literature you're writing about. It's a statement that requires support. That's what makes it a claim. And if it didn't require support, it wouldn't really be worth discussing, right? Or writing an essay about. And so what you can do is chop your thesis statement into a couple of pieces and think about each piece as a little chapter in your essay. And each of those chapters will be a body paragraph. So each of those body paragraphs should be structured like so. You see the part here on this slide that says claim, context, evidence, analysis, synthesis, and transition. You can follow this pattern for each body paragraph in your essay, so each paragraph between the introduction and the conclusion. You begin with the claim that you want to support in that paragraph, and then you kind of lead into a piece of evidence from the source that you're writing about, from the poem or short story that you're writing about. Give a little context for it first, like say, in line 3, the writer says blah, blah, blah. Then introduce the piece of evidence, then analyze that piece of evidence. So show how it backs up the claim you began the paragraph with, and then tie it all together and transition to the next paragraph. If you're needing some examples right about now, here you go. So what I did was I basically just drew up a sample thesis statement from Stephen Lynn's analysis in chapter 3. So he does this analysis of Ars Poetica by Archibald MacLeish, and he writes this sample student essay about this poem. And in this sample essay, his thesis statement seems to be that in Ars Poetica, Archibald MacLeish suggests that a poem shouldn't merely describe an experience, but instead should itself constitute an experience. So that's Stephen Lynn's essay. That's an interpretive claim about the poem's thematic meaning. So it's about abstract meaning. It's about experience. It's about constituting an experience. It's about description. It's not just about concrete details and concrete things. So this is his thesis statement. This is his perspective on what the poem communicates. And working in support of his thesis statement are 3 minor claims, or 3 kind of like sub-claims. And each of these could be the minor claim that begins a body paragraph. And then what you would do to support each of these minor claims is go through that process I described on the previous slide. So the claim, context, and so on. So 3 minor claims that would work in support of this thesis statement are, first of all, MacLeish's poem is full of seeming contradictions. Secondly, these contradictions suggest that a poem should go beyond describing reality. And thirdly, in fact, MacLeish is suggesting that poetry itself is a reality, an experience in its own right, rather than merely describing real-world experience. So what you can see is that if you went through and supported all of these minor claims, you would have also supported the thesis statement that's above. So the idea is that by the time you get through supporting each of these minor claims, your thesis statement has been fully supported, and then you can write a concluding paragraph, and then the essay's over. So here you go. Here is a sample body paragraph that would work in support of minor claim number 1 from the previous slide. So see minor claim number 1 there? MacLeish's poem is full of seeming contradictions. Here's how you'd go about writing a body paragraph in support of that. So you could begin with the claim, which you see right there. MacLeish's poem is full of seeming contradictions right from the first line. Then the next thing that you could do would be to introduce some support for that, some context and evidence. So he, MacLeish, I guess, here, begins by asserting that poetry should be mute and goes on to state that it should be dumb, silent, and wordless. If poetry is made of words and created to be read aloud, this doesn't make much sense. MacLeish's last 2 lines are, a poem should not mean but be. So there's some evidence for the claim that began the paragraph, and then here's my analysis of that evidence that supports the claim. So, if poetry doesn't communicate but simply exists, some might say it's not poetry and therefore doesn't exist at all. So on first glance, this poem seems to destroy everything we typically think makes, there's a typo there, wrote this in a hurry, as you can tell, poetry. Should say makes, not make. It says something and means something. And then here's the synthesis. Here's me tying it all together and the transition to the next paragraph. So after a few close readings, however, we see a different interpretation of McLeish's words are possible. We see a different interpretation of McLeish's words is possible. Oh my, the grammatical errors. Sorry. Anyway, perhaps he is using these contradictions to communicate something valuable and important about what poetry ought to do. So this is a body paragraph. As you can tell, it's rough and there are a couple of typos in it, but this is a sample body paragraph that would work in support of one of the minor claims in your essay. So really what you're doing here is you're coming up with a big thesis statement that's a strong claim about thematic meaning from the perspective of new criticism, and then you're thinking about a couple of points that you could use to support this thesis statement, and then each of those points will become a body paragraph that will look like this. And then you'll have an introduction leading to that thesis statement, a conclusion kind of tying everything together, and then this will be your essay. And if you double space it, if you do all of this thoroughly, it'll end up being about 2 or 3 pages long. If you have questions about anything here, if you want to know more, if you want me to look at a draft you're working on, whatever, please don't hesitate to ask. You can communicate with me through Canvas email. And I hope this helped you to understand Chapter 3 a bit better, and I also hope that it helps to demystify the process of writing Essay 1 a bit for you.